Hey, juniors. Welcome back to Unit 21.1, History of the Americas, the Second World War. So in 21.0, we did kind of a background and looked at Latin America overall. Right now, we're going to really focus on the United States and what was going on in the United States prior to the outbreak of World War II. Let's go. I was supposed to go when I said let's go. Thank you. All right. All right. Okay. This is going to be an Ed puzzle, so I'm about to ask the same question in the Ed puzzle. But what kind of policy did the United States take in terms of their foreign affairs, in terms of foreign intervention in things? Isolationist, right? It's been isolationist since the return to normalcy and Warren G. Harding after the First World War. So as tensions were mounting in Europe, Congress and the American government passed a series of neutrality acts. All right. For this, I'm not going to ask you. All right. And nor do I expect anyone to be able to remember what each neutrality act asked to be done. Right. Just know that these are acts that took measures to prevent the United States from going to war. All right. What these are based off of, hold on one second. All right. The whole premise behind the Neutrality Acts is to not repeat the mistakes made during World War I. All right. I'm going to, again, this is going to be an Ed puzzle thing, but I'm going to write them down. If you remember some of those causes of why America got dragged in to the First World War, we've got a few. I'm going to list them here. I know it's not part of this, but it's a good refresher. One, hello? Hello? Bueller? One, money, right? That's the ultimate thing behind why the United States went to war. I hope you guys remember that. Two, the Lusitania, right? The sinking of the ship with American passengers on board, and that started to really kind of anger American people, which started this huge propaganda. I'm sorry, my handwriting is so bad with this. All right, a propaganda campaign, right? Anti-German. If you remember, you had like the guerrilla holding Lady Liberty, and you have the German soldier killing a baby angel, right? If you guys remember that, hopefully you do. And then fourth, I'm gonna put four down here so I actually have the room to do it. All right, the fourth big reason was ultimately the Zimmerman telegram, right? Hopefully you guys can remember that. If you look at this, the real catalyst for why the United States went to war during World War I was this, right? It was the sinking of a ship with American goods or passengers on board, right? That's really what provoked us into the rest of this stuff happening, right? So the Neutrality Acts really sought to limit the ability or the possibility of America getting dragged into a war they didn't want to be involved in because of a silly kind of shipping mistake, right? So just get that gist of the Neutrality Acts, right? So the first one is going to ban U.S. trade and war materials with any country at war. All right, that's really targeting this, right? We don't want to have to do anything because we've got money invested in a nation, right? So that's really aiming at the whole money thing. All right. 1936, they made revisions to it, and it also forbade loans or credit to belligerents. All right, a belligerent is a nation at war. All right, if you're a belligerent nation, you are at war. All right. America can't loan money like it did to England and France in the First World War to whoever is going to get involved in this next war that, from the bystanders' view, from America's perspective, was inevitable. at this point. It didn't cover civil wars though, so a lot of American businesses are going to make oodles and oodles of money on the Spanish Civil War. Texaco being a big one. It sold a lot of oil to both Francisco Franco and Hitler. Cool, 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 cool. All right. So in 1937, we kind of re-up it. U.S. ships were prohibited from transporting any passengers or items to belligerents, right? So now that same Lusitania mistake cannot be matched, right? And then this is very special. You guys need to remember this one. All right, this is like step one of like the big deal, and you'll see the big deal in a minute. We set up a cash and carry system. Was that if we do trade with you, because it was very obvious that U.S. businesses were wanting to trade with belligerent nations, right? Even though they're not really belligerent yet. This is only 37. But these nations that are about to be belligerent, right? And America's in a depression, right? So what kind of mindset is going to prevail? All right, self-interests are going to prevail. So the American government is like, all right, it's going to be good for our companies to sell goods to these nations in Europe. Let's try and protect ourselves as much as possible, and it's called the cash and carry system. So if you want to trade with the United States, you have to pay cash, no loans. So that means if we trade with you and you lose the war, sucks to suck, right? We already got our money. It doesn't matter. We do not need to go fight that war too to protect our investment because you're paying cash, you're paying upfront. And number two, you need to carry it yourself. All right, we are not going to send it from America to wherever. You've got to come pick it up from us. So if you get shot down in the open water, again, sucks to suck. You already paid for it, and now you're the one that has to deal with those repercussions. So that's the cash and carry system. Another neutrality act is going to come. This is again, we're in 37. This is after, this is Munich is going on and all that stuff. So the likelihood of war from again the American perspective is becoming more and more obvious. FDR believed the cash and carry would help France and Great Britain in the event of a war. So he is kind of, he wants to make sure that these neutrality acts are going to help out France and Britain because, this is the first time you're hearing it. FDR is going to market World War II as a war of good versus, which it kind of was, right? The Nazis and the Japanese didn't really do the best things. It's a war of good versus evil. So he wants to help out the good guys if he can, right? So again, the neutrality acts. FDR knows what is going to happen in Europe, and he knows that in order to win, America has to get involved. So he's going to manipulate these neutrality acts as best. All right, this is going to be the final neutrality act, and again, it's going to solidify the idea of a cash and carry thing. So we are now allowed to trade with these belligerent nations as long as it's under the cash and carry premise, right? So that's the evolution of the neutrality acts. We started being a wall really high, very, very hard for us to get dragged into a war. And as war became more likely and profiteering off that war became more likely, we kind of lower that wall as best we can. All right. Here's a really great picture. All right. All out aid to our allies, right? So the United States is going to do whatever it can to send stuff to its allies so that it can kind of circle its enemies, right? Encircle its enemies and win the war, kind of drown out its enemies. This is going to be in reference to something I say in a minute. All right, this is going to make a lot more sense why this picture looks like this in a second. All right, so again, as the war became more and more likely to happen, FDR is going to do more and more to prepare America for that war. First, and this picture might make more sense when you hear this. FDR is going to give something called a quarantine speech right around this time. where he likens Nazism and fascism to a disease, right? It's very relevant right now. Yeah, unfortunately relevant right now. But he says it's a disease and it's going to spread. And the best way to beat a disease is to quarantine it, right? We need to make sure that it is contained to wherever it is. And I'm using the word contain for a very specific reason. Try and remember that next year. I don't know why I'm doing this with my hand, but yes, try and remember the word contain for next year. But if this fascist disease is planning on spreading, we need to make sure it stays in Europe, right? So we need to aid our allies and we need to prepare to contain it because FDR is very afraid that that disease might spread to places in Latin America that are already leaning towards the right way, places like Brazil, right? And if it comes into Latin America, that is violating the Monroe Doctrine, right? That is violating the good neighbor policy, and that's going to be a very fearful idea for the United States. All right. So again, I'll write down that speech. I don't know how to spell quarantine, right? So cue the quarantine speech. I'm living in a quarantine. I'd rather spell it, right? Who needs that? And again, as war becomes more and more likely, FDR is going to start to prepare us for war. All right. If you remember, the New Deal did not get the United States out of the Depression. It helped, but it didn't cure us of the Great Depression, right? This stuff is what is ultimately going to cure us of the Great Depression. FDR is going to start to... I clicked the wrong button. All right? One of the first words we cover this year in militarism. He is going to start a rapid expansion of the United States Armed Forces, both in terms of recruiting men and making supplies. All right? This right here is a big deal. Oh my God, I pressed the wrong button. Spoilers! 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 Oh my God! All right, we're good. We're good. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. All right, we've got this. The B-17 Flying Fortress bomber. All right, if you remember from the Battle for Britain, I told you, and in like a couple of like the synchronous classes, we talked about this, right? You've got your bomber plane, and you've got your fighter planes. The fighter planes escort the bomber plane, right? On long-range bomber missions, these things are big. They're hard to maneuver, but they've got big gas tanks. They can fly a long distance. These guys are really agile. They can maneuver, but they've got teeny tiny gas tanks, right? So on long-range bomber missions, these guys have to drop out, and these bombers become unescorted. So if you look at Part 3 and 4 of the Battle for Britain, the German bombers were getting shot down very frequently by British fighter planes. America saw this going on, all right? And America said, all right, we need to make bombers that can be long range. How do we do that? I mean, we need our bombers to be long range, but we don't have the fighter planes to escort them. What do we do? Well, fighter planes at the time didn't have oxygen masks. No planes had oxygen masks for that matter. So if we take it and we do this with our bombers and make them go really high so that the fighter planes of the enemy cannot attack, we can bomb whatever we want. All right, and that technology is going to appear first in the B-17. All right, later it's going to be evolved into the... I pressed the wrong button again. Into the B-29. And that's what's going to drop the atomic bomb on Japan. All right, that's how we were able to drop the atomic bombs on Japan. Our bombers couldn't get shot down. They flew too high. All right, so kind of a technology aspect of war coming in, and I'm realizing this video is coming in. It's very, very long. This is a picture of the Boeing. All right, yes, that company, Flying Fortress. So this is the B-17. All right, it's going to be able to fly super duper duper high and go on long range bombing missions unescorted by fighter planes. All right. Back home, after things like the quarantine speech and militarism by FDR and all this stuff, you've got people that are going to be very worried about the aspect of America going back to war and breaking our 20-year kind of run of isolation population. All right, the people that are very, very, very against the war are going to be called the America First Committee. All right, the AFC. Um, and they're going to speak out about American neutrality and that the British were going to try to draw us into a war just like they did the First World War. And, if American goods start to be, shot down overseas, going to be dragged into war, and we can't let that happen. The American First Committee is very, very, very anti everything that FDR is trying to do to prepare us to go to war. After Dunkirk happens, after the evacuation of continental Europe, America is going to really ramp up its aid and its militarism, and the neutrality acts are going to become more and more and more irrelevant. And then this happens. All right, FDR gives a very, very, very famous speech. All right, where he calls the United States an arsenal for democracy. All right, if you guys don't know what an arsenal is a place to kind of store and build weapons, right? So he is saying, once we started to militarize, we saw our economy starts to bounce back, and we see the real power of America when it comes to war is our ability to produce. All right, America's got the ability to produce unlike any nation in the world at the time. All right. So he says we need to be the arsenal for our allies. All right. Britain is getting beat up. All right. They are losing the battle for Britain. We need to supply them with weapons. We need to supply them with planes, food rations, manpower to win these battles. We need to be the arsenal for our allies. And that is going to give birth to the Lend-Lease Act. All right. If you only remember one thing from this entire unit so far, it is the Lend-Lease Act. All right, the Lend-Lease Act is officially going to propel the United States out of the Great Depression, because it's going to take all of the old stuff that America has, and it's going to lend it to our allies overseas, right? And then we are going to be able to produce new things to replace those old things. So things like warships, things like planes, things like tanks, things like guns are going to be sent overseas to our allies. All right, that is what the Lend-Lease Act is. It is U.S. production goes up. Trade goes up. This is 1941. So who are our allies is something I'm going to ask in that Ed Puzzle video that I make. It's Britain and it's the Soviet Union now. All right, and this is really what is going to change the tide of the war for the Soviet Union. If you remember, I told you that winter period of 1941, Stalin is going to make all these tanks and radios to fight the Germans. He got stuff from the United States. All right, the United States is now involved in the war through the Lend-Lease Act. All right, we're not at war yet. Well, we are in the winter of 41. We'll get to that in the next video that I make. But billions of dollars are going to flow through the U.S. economy and into our allies, which is what's going to help them withstand that German attack. This happens in 41. What year is the year of the turning points? 42, the next year. So that U.S. supply, that U.S. kind of aid is going to allow the allies to change the tide of the war and the turning points to happen. So kind of this should be all the connectivity now. This should be everything kind of that we learned in Unit 10 about World War II now making sense. All right. Here is a picture of the Lend-Lease Act. All right. So if you look at it, munition, war stuff, shipping things like boats just to ship goods, agricultural products. We are going to send food all over the world. The surplus of food and the flight of farmers that have gone on since like 1918, 1919, 1920 is finally solved, because now we've got a place to unload all the food that we have. All right, and industrial items are all going to be sold to our allies overseas. Billions upon billions of dollars are going to be sent to allies. All right, where the United Kingdom receives most of it, but the Soviet Union also receives a lot of it. Keep that in the back of your head, because if you're going to be a person I'm not even going to say that. That's just getting too far ahead of myself. Remind me about this point in this video, Unit 21.2. I don't know how many minutes I am into this, but remind me that Lend-Lease thing. Remind me about this line right here. That line right here next year. All right? It's going to be relevant, I promise. All right? If you also notice, China. All right? We do send goods to China. We are supportive of the Chinese nationalists, all right, not the Chinese communists, but they're the United Front at the time. So the Chinese nationalists were supporting them against Japan. Spoiler alert, Japan's not going to be happy about that. All right. This is already getting too long. FDR is going to tell U.S. boats that are patrolling the waters to shoot Axis boats on sight. So with that order, they match the order, so U.S. boats are going to start to be shot down before America is ever actually at war. October of 1941, the USS Reuben James is going to be shot down. In November of 41, FDR tells all merchant ships to be armed, all right, whether the merchant ships are armed or they're escorted by a naval vessel, so to protect our goods now going overseas. So the Neutrality Acts by November of 1941 are null and void. That's not the most relevant thing. I'm going to let you guys take a look at these slides on your own, but with the Lend-Lease Act and with all of these things, America is going to draw closer relationships to most Latin American countries, all right? It becomes a little bit weary about some Latin American countries that are, again, left-leaning, and what it's going to do, it's going to send them a lot of aid, all right? That is, again, that idea of neo-imperialism, right? So the Lend-Lease Act is going to be extended to places like Brazil, all right, because it wants to make sure that Brazil does not fall off in the wrong direction, right? Blah, 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 blah. All right, and then this is it, all right? I'm sorry, this one's a long one, but I hope it's good. So this is a very, very, very secret meeting, all right? All right. This is between FDR and Churchill. All right. They are going to meet on a boat in Newfoundland. All right, and they are going to talk about the world after this war. All right, and how the United States is going to step up and be the kind of protectorate of the world, right? This is where FDR is first going to float the idea of something like the United Nations. He is going to talk about essentially a new world order in which the United States is number one. All right, the United States is going to, after this war, the United States is going to supplant Britain for the number one power. All right, and the British Empire is going to have to make concessions to the United States. All right, and in return, the United States is going to win this war. All right, and now that the United States, and this is FDR, right? This is the greatest president that we've ever had. This is one of the greatest men of all time. Is talking about free trade and self-determination and crumbling down the British Empire and giving independence to all these nations and a new world order, all right? He is taking the ideas of Woodrow Wilson and putting them into a much more sustainable action, all right? And the United States is going to be able to follow through because of what the British and the Americans agree on at the Atlantic Charter. All right, it's really the first of many conversations, but this is going to take place in early 41, before America is ever at war. All right, FDR knew that America would be involved in the Second World War. He didn't know when, he didn't know why. He knew why. He didn't know how, but he knew that America would be involved in the war, and they would win that war, and after the war, America would be number one. And then this is a picture of the Atlantic Charter. This right here is FDR. This is good old Winnie. All right, and this is a picture taken at the Atlantic Charter. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you have any questions, and as always, be good.